Should I kill myself or have a cup of coffee? This quote is commonly attributed to French philosopher Albert Camus. The importance of whether the quote can be correctly attributed to Camus is dwarfed by the fact that the question loudly beckons pertinent and thoughtful consideration. This question provides a vehicle in which we can explore how we ought to think about our relationship to the absurdity of the situation we find ourselves in. What is the absurd? Traditionally, the absurd refers to the relationship between the human requirement for meaning and purpose and the seemingly purposeless universe in which this search takes place. It's an acknowledgement of the dissonance between the human subjective and the universal objective. Every person who contemplates this sort of problem likely arrives gradually to the party. Very few people, as far as I know, teleport to parties. Likewise, most people aren't spontaneously tombstoned by the metaphysical undertaker while they tend to their begonias on a quiet afternoon. Once the problem has made itself known, it can't become unknown. Some people are better than others at relegating it to a secure and distant part of their mind. Others struggle immensely with the weight of it. Some exceptionally lucky people seem to possess ironclad powers of psychological immunity. I envy those people. In any case, how should we confront this problem? I have absolutely no idea. But we'll see if we can't cobble something together. With Pandora's box now open, the next logical step after approaching is the squirmy, awkward confrontation. You know the feeling. You stare into the abyss, and the abyss stares back. It glares back with icy indignation, daring you to come closer. Now you're playing an ill-advised game of chicken with the abyss. That's what I did anyways, or at least what I thought I was doing. In reality, though, I was playing chicken with myself. Once I'd become sufficiently intimate with the problem of the absurd, I continued to ascribe human agency to it. This paradigm I'd unwittingly begun to think within armed the absurd with its own will, juxtaposed against my own. So it's like, great, not only do I have to face the infinite vacuum of space, now I have to do it believing it might possess some of the same unsavory attributes I possess. I think this is a pitfall that most of us will encounter in one form or another at various points in our lives. And for good reason. It's baked into our evolutionary history. If you were hunting on the African savanna 100,000 years ago, the anthropomorphizing of natural occurrences could have been the difference between you returning to your tribe with dinner or the other way around. If you heard a rustle in the grass and attributed it to the wind, one of two things would have happened. It was the wind, and you were correct, or it was a predator, and your part in the evolutionary history of the species comes to an abrupt end. This worked really, really well for us for quite a long time. We might not be here talking about it if we didn't develop this habit. But it doesn't translate very well when the predator is the infinite expanse of space and time. A point of diminishing return arrives rather quickly. Difficult and convoluted consideration of the absurd is necessary when you first encounter it, because it demands it of you. The difficult part, or at least the more difficult part, is knowing when you've extracted all that can be meaningfully extracted within this infrastructure of thinking. If we can successfully detach ourselves from viewing the absurd in this way, it becomes much easier to deal with. It's no longer another will you have to contend with. It just is. The only measuring stick against which it makes sense to contend is now yourself. Okay, we've now approached the absurd. We've shaken hands with it, and we've politely asked it to explain who it purports to be. We are nearing enlightenment. But now what? We've inspected the stitching holding the tapestry of reality together. I would argue a sufficient amount at this point. Could you go further? Sure. But at this point, I think we'd be beginning to wade into the waters of diminishing return. To me, 3 options seem to present themselves. Now, before we discuss these 3 options, it's important to note that the psychological maze each individual navigates during the course of this endeavor is going to vary greatly. But regardless of how and when you navigate your maze, I think most people will land in one of 3 categories. We could opt for believing in objective meaning, which is to say, we receive meaning from a supernatural originator. This is an alright option. It works for a lot of people. Personally, I'm not a fan because I don't like being told what to do by supernatural entities. The second option is to kill yourself. Now, if you lived your life in a vacuum, where your life was unimaginably rife with suffering, either physical or mental, and if somehow you removing yourself from the situation didn't impact your loved ones, and you thought about the problem thoroughly enough to build the case for yourself, and that case withstood genuine and arduous examination, then I think it could be justified. Otherwise, I wouldn't recommend this one. And now we arrive at the third option, my personal favorite. It's choose your own adventure. You get to be the arbiter of what means anything. Cultivate compassion for others. Care more about the things you care about. Love the people you love more deeply. Living in this way is actually enough to manage the absurd. Well, that's all for this week. Thanks for watching, guys. Those are me thoughts on absurdity. No idea what next week's video is going to be on, but rest assured, next week will be a week.